What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Fish the Moment. In this video, I'm going to explain two distinct bass behaviors that will help you get a better understanding of how bass set up year-round on your fisheries. We're going to be graphing around offshore, finding some offshore bass together with our electronics, and as I do that, I'm going to explain these two distinct bass behaviors in as much detail as I can. Before we get into that though, I want to give a huge shout out to one of the sponsors of the Fish the Moment YouTube channel, and that's Bridgeford Foods. Bridgeford makes an amazing beef jerky that I always have in the boat with me as a great on-the-water snack. And more than anything, they support bass fishing. It's one of the few brands outside of the fishing industry that supports bass fishing as much as they do. So definitely check out Bridgeford Foods and pick up a pack of their Bridgeford beef jerky in your local dollar stores, checkout aisles, and grocery stores near you. Okay, so let's get into it, guys. We are out here on a small lake in Arkansas. It is the 1st of November, and the two bass behaviors I want to discuss today are bass that are setting up in an ambush mode and bass that are setting up in a chasing or pelagic mode. What are those two modes? Basically, an ambush mode is bass that are setting up around some type of cover or structure, and they're using that piece of cover or structure to ambush their prey, whether that is a school of bait fish, crawfish, brim, perch, alewife, anything like that. On the flip side, you have the chasing fish or the pelagic fish. Pelagic fish are basically fish that are sitting out here in the middle of the lake, kind of like what we're graphing out now, and instead of relating to structure or cover, they're related to the prey or the bait fish they're actually chasing. So as we graph around out here, we're going to hopefully find both the pelagic fish and those ambush fish. One thing that I find interesting is that you usually can find both on any given fishing day, regardless of the conditions and the time of year. So if you want to go chase after some ambush fish, you can. If you want to chase after some of those pelagic fish, you also can do that. As we kind of graph around out here, we can actually see several different places where these fish might ambush prey and also where they may set up in that pelagic mode. If we look at our side scan view here, we can see there are both situations potentially developing. Here we have a couple of brush piles. These brush piles are places where bass will set up in an ambush mode. They'll hide in the shadows of those brush piles on sunny days like this and wait for the bait fish to come by. There are other fish though that don't like to sit around and wait in these brush piles, and instead will actually get into these balls of shad and just follow the shad schools around. We actually can see a fish, I believe, in that shad school right there in the middle of that shad ball. There's one fish, and I don't know if that's bass or something else, so we're not going to get too excited. And when I'm trying to find fish in these two modes, I really like to pay attention to the conditions. Today we have bluebird skies and no wind, and when you have those conditions, you're going to find fish in two distinct situations depending on the mood you're chasing. For the fish in an ambush mode, you're going to find that they're more tight to cover that can provide shade, whether that is going to be a brush pile, a stump, a rock pile, or they're going to be in the shadow of some type of structure. So we actually graphed on our side scan here a really nice road bed, and that road bed will cast a shadow as that sun hits the lip, and you can actually see that dark space here on the screen. That dark space is actually the shadow that's being cast by that road bed. So these fish could set up in the shadow of that road bed, or they could set up again around a brush pile. And there's a bunch of brush piles right here that actually have bait fish by them. And this is actually a really good potential looking area because you have both the bait right in that general zone and you have those brush piles. Unfortunately though, we're not seeing any fish necessarily in those brush piles. So it may mean that these fish are setting up shallower, maybe they're setting up deeper, I'm not 100% sure. But if they're not in the brush piles super well in this specific area of the lake, they may be setting up around these bait balls. We can see there's a bunch of bait fish out here in the middle of the lake, and usually on these sunny days with no wind, you'll find that the bait fish are going to sit higher in the water column. They're going to sit closer to the surface, even if they're used to sitting deeper, let's say in 15 or 20 feet of water, and you'll oftentimes find the majority of the bass are going to be up here in the top of the water column as well, chasing them. We don't see any fish on these bait balls, and when I am trying to find these pelagic fish, you want to see fish in the area, at least I do, on my electronics before I try to fish for them. So we have a few different options today to find these fish, either trying to find fish that are in an ambush mode around some type of cover or structure, again, brush pile, stumps, the edge of a drop off or a road bed, or trying to find some fish that are chasing out here on shad in the middle and acting in a chasing mode or a pelagic mode. We may find fish, again, doing both in the exact same area, though I haven't seen any fish so far, which is not maybe the best sign that we're in like the right zone of the lake. And that's another thing kind of to pay attention to. A lot of times fish will set up maybe more in ambush mode on the upper end of these lakes, and then more in the pelagic mode down by like the dam or something like that, or vice versa. We don't have like really big creeks or anything out here, so maybe the fish are setting up more in that like ambush mode towards the main lake, and they're more pelagic in the backs of the creeks. It kind of just depends on the fishery you're on, but we are out here today on this smaller lake, so we don't really have as much variety. But one thing I do notice is that there is a pile of shad out here in the middle of the lake. Like, there's shad everywhere. And this lake is actually drawn down pretty low right now. We have the water down, I would say, about 2.5 to 3 feet below normal pool because of the drought we've been having in Arkansas. And as a result, I feel like most of the fish are going to be more towards the middle of the lake. If we had some higher water, some rising water, maybe some rain, these fish might be pushing more towards the banks and the creeks. But I do want to spend some good amount of time graphing out here more towards the middle of the lake today, just because of that water level, and try to find some offshore fish. Fall is a great time to find offshore fish when there's shad out here in the middle. But one thing that you have to be careful of is that you don't just stop every time you just see shad. You can see on the down scan, the side scan here, there is shad everywhere right now. And so if we stopped on every single bait ball we found, you would waste hours and hours of time. So instead, I like to really focus on finding fish around the bait first with my electronics. We've only been graphing for 9 minutes. I know it might seem like a long time, but if you can spend 15, 20 minutes graphing around before you start fishing, you can save a ton of time, maybe finding fish like the ones we just found right here that are setting up underneath these shad. This is what we've been looking for right here. Okay, so we have these fish. It's surprising actually they're pushed so tight to the bottom. I don't know why they're so tight to the bottom there. And we actually have some fish popping on the side scan view too. So we have a bunch of fish in the area. There's even more fish down there. I don't know why they're setting so deep. I'll point these out on the different views. So on our 2D sonar view, you can see all of these little arches that are right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all arched up, even right through here. And they're right on the bottom, which kind of makes it feel like I catch them on a crankbait or something. So I'm going to mark these really quick with a waypoint, just with fish. And there's bait fish all over this area, so it's not like we're going to have to worry about not having bait or anything. There's bait here. And we also can see that there's even more fish just kind of spread out through this whole area. I mean, they're just loaded through here. What in the world? They're all through here, all over the bottom of the lake. I don't think these are all necessarily bass, but I have a feeling that a lot of these could be bass as well. And these are fish that are really hard to find for guys because they're so tight to the bottom. And the way I find them is using this color palette I do on my Lowrance unit, where you have that bottom being darker and then that really stark white, and then you just see those small arches dotted all over the bottom. So there's a bunch of fish down the bottom down here. I did like the fact that when we first saw these fish, we found them around this little hump. There's a little bit of hard bottom there. I like that there's a hard bottom area for them to relate to. So I'm actually gonna mark this with rock as well, just because that is a place where those bass could eventually ambush or push the fish onto. And when these fish are in a pelagic mode, let's say they're kind of roaming on the bottom, chasing these shad, they do like to ambush the prey around hard bottom areas, because instead of, I guess, digging the shad into silt bottom, which then puffs up, you know, silt and mud and kind of makes it hard for them to see, if they can push against a hard bottom area, it's very clean bottom, they don't have mud kicking up, and they can ambush that prey a lot easier. Moreover though, we had a little brush pile here I noticed that has a couple fish in it. So there's a fish right there and a fish right there. These are bass that are in more of an ambush mode on that brush pile. So we're gonna mark that brush pile right there, and we need to kind of get back because we've graphed all around here. And as you can see, there's a lot going on in this area. So we're gonna keep graphing for a second because I don't know exactly what's happening with this deal. I would love to see hopefully some map updates, there we go. I would love to see some fish that might be suspended up a little bit higher, chasing on these shad. Those fish are a little bit easier to catch in general when you're dealing with the pelagic or chasing fish. But if we don't find those fish higher up in the water column, then we can obviously fish for these fish that are setting up potentially on these brush piles and isolated pieces of wood cover, which are a lot easier to target with traditional offshore methods. One thing I will say is that if you're going to try to choose between these two behaviors, one of the main considerations you're going to have is whether you have forward-facing sonar or not. If you don't have forward-facing sonar on your boat, you are most likely going to want to target ambush fish. These fish are around isolated pieces of rock, wood, grass, things like that, and you can mark them with a waypoint and cast on them a lot more consistently, and those fish in ambush mode are going to stick around that piece of cover even after you graph them. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with pelagic fish, you might graph them like right now as we graph over them, but in 30 seconds they're going to swim 20, 30 yards in one direction or the other. And so the only way you can kind of stay with them is by graphing around with forward facing sonar and basically relocating those fish with that forward facing. And that's why for years a lot of guys kind of struggled to catch pelagic fish or those roaming fish, except for when they were actually like schooling and busting on the surface, or when they're in small wolf packs chasing brim up shallow. Sometimes you'll get those pelagic fish that roam and chase, and they'll just run up and down these banks behind us here, just kind of roaming through here, looking for brim on brim beds, and they'll just roll through these areas and cover miles of water at times. And when they finally eventually roll across a school of brim, they'll feed and then they'll keep rolling. And so the two most prominent pelagic fish strategies over the years, again, brim beds with small wolf packs of bass or just schooling bass. But now with forward facing, we know that we can actually chase down these roaming fish because we have that technology. I've known that these fish have been out here for 15 years because I graph so much with traditional sonar, but I could never target them effectively because by the time you drop a waypoint, spin around and cast on them, they're completely gone. So I always preferred to try to find areas where you had specific objects like a brush pile, a rock pile that was holding those fish and where they could actually set up on. Now, as we kind of get through here, we'll notice that we haven't really been seeing that many bass. We have something popping up on the screen right here. I don't know what all that was. There's a bunch of random stuff. We haven't seen that many bass in this zone. After we kind of marked all those first initial waypoints, there are a few bass here and there, and there are a few pieces of nice cover on the side scan view. I want to see if I can see any bass in those. These again are going to be more of your ambush fish, and there's actually some bait fish around that brush pile right there. We will mark that, and I want to see if we can kind of graph through here and find maybe 2 or 3 brush piles that might have fish, because I want to have a good combination of these areas where the fish again are going to ambush, and then a good combination of where these fish are going to be more pelagic. I think the first stretch we marked with all the bait in the area and those fish kind of closer to the bottom are going to be more of those pelagic fish we're going to have to kind of potentially target with forward facing if we wanted to do that, or you know, just maybe fan cast around the area and just kind of hope to get lucky. But I also feel like we should be able to find some fish setting up around brush piles. You just have to find the right brush piles, and I don't just come out here, guys, and just randomly start throwing at every brush pile I mark. I like to try to find the ones that either have some bait fish activity around them, or at the bare minimum, I like to find some brush piles that have a few dots or a few fish. That's kind of my number one clue I'm going to fish a brush pile or not, is I want to see bass around the pile, and here is one right here that has some bass around it. This is what I'm looking for if I'm going to be fishing for these ambush fish. On the side scan view, we can see several dots around this brush pile. I'm going to keep letting the screen roll for a second just to make sure I'm not missing any more piles, but this is a really good brush pile. If we zoom in, we can actually see a fish right there and its shadow, and there's another shadow of a fish right there. There's a few more around that area, so that's a nice brush pile. It's pretty big, so I'm going to mark a couple. Oh, engine cut out on me. Benefits of having an old boat that idles for hours and hours and hours. We're good though. Okay, so we have a nice little channel here too. That's kind of interesting. Need to give it enough gas. Sometimes I need to make sure I get gas in the engine, but we'll keep rolling. We only have thousands of hours on this engine. It'll make it eventually, but or it won't make it eventually. But we're working today, knocking some wood, because this boat, trusty 2005 Triton, 2004 Mercury, it's carried me a long ways and a lot of hours of graphing like this. We can see there are some fish over here, also on this ledge. I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of random fish here too. I'm not feeling that great about the fish we saw back there just because of how many fish we're seeing all over the bottom out here. Makes me think that those maybe aren't bass necessarily. They could just be carp, catfish, other stuff. So I'm not feeling 100% confident in what we saw there. There looked like there were a few decent fish though. I did catch a couple fish way out here like 2-3 weeks ago, but nothing crazy. So I do have these waypoints marked, but there's nothing out there right now. I have not seen anything that jumps off the screen. I think I saw maybe a couple fish, like, so here's a little school of bass. They're really small, but here's a little pelagic school. So these are bass right here. They're suspended, chasing around. And if I can see like 4 or 5 more groups like that, then there's a potential that we might be able to fish this area, but I'm not really seeing that at the moment. So I'm gonna keep graphing. And I don't like to stop graphing, guys, until I see something that absolutely knocks me off my feet most of the time. I graph for a minimum of 30 minutes. That's my rule. Unless I see something where I'm like, this is 100% the juice, I'm gonna catch fish. And that just comes from years of experience. I graph a lot, so that's why I know what that looks like. But minimum of 30 minutes of graphing before I actually start fishing. And usually when you see something good, you're gonna know on the screen. It's not one of those situations most of the time when you're graphing out here where the spot you find is so subtle that it's gonna take like a really trained eye to find it. I think that's one thing a lot of anglers mess up when they're fishing offshore, when they're graphing offshore, is that they really try to focus on finding these subtle areas or these little needles in the haystack versus just trying to find the super obvious stuff. And it takes more time graphing to find the obvious stuff. You may be like, oh, I've never found an obvious spot in my life. Well, it's probably because you haven't spent enough time graphing, is what I would argue on that point. Because when you do spend the time behind the electronics, there's a really good shot you're going to find a good group of fish. Like, here we go. Here's a spot that just like jumps off the screen right here on me. And this actually looks really good. On the side scan view here, we have a tree over here that has 3 fish in it that are just sitting perfect. So if we zoom in, you can see 1, 2, 3 fish right in that brush pile. It's exactly what we're looking for. So that is a good sign. There are a few more brush piles around that I don't see fish in, but I'm gonna mark these anyways just because I can pull up and fish these. And there's bait fish in the area. We can see bait fish on the left side of our side scan screen over here. And so what I'm thinking is that there may be, we've seen a couple of brush piles now that have had a few fish in them, and we haven't seen that many roaming or pelagic fish. We've seen a couple, they're out here for sure, but we haven't seen that many. So it may be one of those days where we just need to target these isolated brush piles, focus on that rather than trying to get too cute with it and chase around all of these fish offshore, just kind of roaming. But I want to graph through a side scan a little bit more. You will notice I use side scan quite a bit to find fish in brush piles. I feel like side scan is my #1 tool when I go to the lake for sure, especially for finding these fish in this ambush mode, 100%. We have another nice brush pile here that's on the edge of this deal. It looks like there may be some fish just kind of setting up around that little drop off too. There's a really nice ledge or a drop, and that was an area we talked about earlier where those fish can also set up in an ambush mode. And so I really like that drop off there. Look how many dots and things are on the screen. I'm gonna mark this entire ledge down just to have that marked, because you don't really see it on the mapping. And what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna work down that with a crankbait and a jig and mark this whole thing. And the reason I'm marking all this stuff, ooh, nice little brush pile right there. The reason I'm marking all this stuff is I'm gonna probably try to fish some of these ambush fish with out forward facing sonar to start out here. And then if we can't get those fish to roll or figure it out, I'm probably gonna go back over to where we graphed those fish earlier and potentially see if we can find some pelagic fish with the forward facing sonar. Before we do that though, I do want to just double check that we're not missing anything crazy. So we're going to regraph this area just a little bit. We can see we marked a few brush piles and we have a nice little zone right here. So I really like this and the fact that we have a couple of brush piles. We know we saw fish around. We have that nice rocky ledge out here, and we're seeing now a bunch of dots on the screen. These are probably not all bass. There's a bunch of dots closer to the bottom. I think these are a lot of like other species of fish, just random species. But it looked like that was definitely the little juice zone that we marked. So I'm gonna spin back around, get us into position. We're about 100-ish feet away from this deal. I'm gonna graph just a little bit in here just to see. I always like, before I stop and fish, I'm very picky about graphing everything around the area because I don't want to miss anything super obvious. If you have forward facing, you can drop the trolling motor and you can get away with kind of just randomly fishing around. But when you're trying to cast at waypoints specifically, you really need to make sure you have marked everything you want to fish beforehand, which is what I'm trying to do here. But I'm not seeing anything that completely blows me off my feet. There's a couple of balls of shad and stuff out here, but again, a few balls of shad, but not really any fish around them feeding on them. So these fish are definitely setting up, I feel like, better in an ambush mode today. There are days like when you get really calm, cloudy days when the fish won't set up around cover as much and they won't be as much in an ambush mode, and you'll find them setting tighter to the bottom and spread out. And so if we were out here, let's say, ooh, that's a good brush pile, I'll mark that real quick so I can fish that. If we were fishing out here on a cloudy day, the first spot we marked would be an area that I'd be really excited about, just because those fish are tighter to the bottom and they're more spread apart, which is what I would expect them to be doing on a cloudy day, at least the bass. But because we have the sun today and no wind, I would expect that any bass that we do find there pelagic, again, are going to be high in the water column, and all the rest of them are going to be around these pieces of cover. If you had a windy day that had clouds, that's when these fish will start to kind of rise up a little bit, or they'll set up around like a rocky pile and stuff like that in an ambush mode, but they may rise up because of the wind and the clouds. But anyways, we're going right over top of this brush pile. I'm talking over here and I'm about to hit this brush pile. That's not good. We'll just graph over it and see what it looks like again. Maybe it doesn't look as good as I thought it did. Let me look at it again. Oh, it actually doesn't look as good. That was a good call that I didn't graph over that. Or I didn't fish that. That doesn't look as good as I thought. Anyways, cool. Well, let's pull up our mapping here. We're gonna make a few casts on this little deal. We have several things to kind of cast at, and we're just gonna use our waypoints to get us started. I'm gonna set my range ring here to 100 feet, and I'm gonna use my heading arrow, my range ring, to get lined up. So let me spin this camera around and get up on the trolling motor. Okay, so let's see if we can get a few old school style here. Just gonna throw a Strike King 5 XD crankbait first at these little rocky spots, and then I'll pick up a jig as well after that. But just gonna make a few casts, get up here within striking distance on this deal. I'm just gonna line up again with those waypoints. And that's why I marked so many waypoints earlier. You can see I have that thing nice and lined out so I can see exactly where I need to be. I also have a heading arrow on my or a heading sensor on my graph, so that way I know exactly which direction my boat is pointed. And once I get within about 75 feet, which is basically getting those waypoints within, I don't know, right about there, I guess, I'm gonna fire that crankbait out. And I'm just gonna crank a few of these just to see, and see if there's any active fish on this drop off. And then if there's not any active fish, which without the wind, I don't think that the crankbait's going to be like the #1 option, then we'll pick up a jig, drag around for a minute. And again, these fish are going to be in an ambush mode, so in theory we should be able to just hit, as long as we hit kind of in the general area where they're at, we should be able to get bit. I don't like the fact that there's a bunch of muck on the bottom here with this crankbait. Not ideal. Hitting a few rocks and things like that, nothing crazy. Need to tune my crankbait. Oh, maybe it's just this stuff that's on there. I'm just making fan casts around these waypoints, getting backlashes, you know, the normal thing. So that's kind of how it goes. I'm not gonna make a bunch of casts on this deal. Since it's a bigger piece of structure where I have multiple waypoints marked, I am going to make more casts than I maybe normally would. I'll make like 7 to 8 casts on this deal with this crankbait. And then I'm gonna pick up the jig, drag it around down there. Getting kind of close on this deal, but that's because I'm fishing a crankbait. I want to get a little bit closer so I actually get my bait down to depth. If I was fishing that jig first, I would say a tiny bit further away, but we're not in really any big danger right now just because we're cranking. Make one more cast right here, just off the tip of this thing. I'm just casting on the very left side of these waypoints, and then I'm gonna make one cast kind of down this deal. And this will let us know really quick if we can catch them fast and furious out here offshore. Whenever I'm throwing a crankbait like this, if they are aggressive, they're gonna bite right away. If they're not, that's when you pull out the jig. And that's probably where I will focus more on the brush than on this actual drop. I didn't see a ton of fish on this drop, but we saw fish around in those brush piles, and sometimes those fish will be hiding right on the bottom against those drops. You can crank them up, especially in the fall. They'll get kind of aggressive, but not happening. There's a little bit of mixture of like grass and muck and all kinds of stuff down there, so I don't know what's going on. It's not that bad though, so we'll put that up, throw a jig in a couple of these brush piles really quick, and then we'll keep rolling. But there's 3 brush piles over here that we marked, so we'll mark those really fast, or fish those really fast. And then if we don't get bitten in either of these 3 brush piles, we're going to keep rolling, and kind of lets us know that maybe the fish we marked weren't actually setting up in the brush themselves, or we're just in the wrong part of the lake. We shall see. Fire on this brush pile over here. Just starting with a jig on these brush piles. That's my #1 bait for brush pile fishing year round, especially in the fall. I really like throwing the football jig. Something about a jig in the fall and brush just seem to get more bites than a worm, like a big worm or a drop shot or anything like that. I just find I get better quality fish and good numbers on a jig. So didn't really hit it that well that cast. Let's try again. This is lined up with these waypoints is slightly tricky because you don't have the forward facing obviously to line up with, so you're just kind of having to take a couple extra casts with that jig. But once we get it dialed in, we'll know exactly we're on it right there. We'll know we're in it. We can kind of triangulate by looking at a spot on the shore, and then we can hit that cast. But usually I'm not making more than 3 or 4 casts on these brush piles anyways. I'm not trying to make like 30 casts in each brush pile. I like to just make a few, usually within 2 to 3 casts in a pile, they're gonna eat it. And if they don't, move on. It's kind of the name of the game. This is a deeper pile. I marked this. It was kind of off the end of this deal, but it didn't look as good as the first 2 I marked. The first 2 looked the ones we had fish in. If we get bit off of just the brush pile I marked, which is brush pile 233, that's the brush pile I actually marked a fish in. If that's the one we get bit off of, we can literally just go around and just mark brush with fish in it and probably just catch one out of almost every one. But that's what's supposed to happen in theory. We'll see. This one didn't get bit off of it. I just marked this one randomly because it was kind of out here in this general zone, so nothing on that deal. Again, 3 or 4 casts in a brush pile maximum, and I move on. I catch 95% of the fish that I catch out of brush piles on my first 3 casts. When they want to eat out of a brush pile, they just eat. You don't have to really like mess around with them too much. So that's kind of the idea. Now, kind of getting back to our topic at hand with the pelagic and the ambush fish. One thing about these ambush fish that I do find that's interesting is that you don't have to mess around as much with them, like we just mentioned, with baits and all that stuff. Like there's certain days where they want, a jig better than a crankbait or vice versa, but usually you can keep it pretty simple. If it's calm and sunny like this, or if it's just calm in general, even calm and cloudy, a jig is going to be your best friend, or a Carolina rig, something slow moving, drop shot, shaky head, depending on the water clarity and stuff like that. But some type of slower moving bait is going to get the job done. You don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel with these fish because again, they're ambushing. They want to just eat what's coming by them. Now, if you have forward facing sonar, you could play with those fish a little bit more and like play with them in terms of throwing a jerk bait or a glide bait or something around those same areas. We're not doing that right now. It's not the purpose of this segment of the video. Just dragging through that rock on that ledge right there. It feels really good, just nothing down there. And so that's kind of the idea. And then when you get more wind or a little bit more cloudy, windy days, but even windy and sunny days, just wind in general, I find that I have a lot more success with a moving bait, usually a crankbait. I would say that a crankbait is my go-to moving bait in an ambush situation 95% of the time. And if you guys have followed my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I throw a jig and a crankbait offshore the majority of the time, especially when I'm not fishing with forward-facing sonar. I'll throw it with forward-facing sonar still too, but when I'm not fishing with forward-facing, a jig and a crankbait accounts for probably 95% of my offshore fish. And it's just great for those ambush fish. For those pelagic fish though, there's a lot more baits you need to employ. And I got a bunch of random stuff on my boat that's designed for those pelagic fish because they're pickier, they're harder to catch, they roam a lot more. And like I've noticed forward facing that because they're chasing live shad, like real shad, they don't just bite whatever you throw at them. They're really picky about the size of the bait, the color at times, the retrieve speed, whether the bait's really far above their face. Sometimes they want it closer to their face. There's a lot of variables with those pelagic fish. And despite the fact they get less pressure, I just feel like they are focused on looking at the food they're trying to eat and visibly chasing it. So as a result, or even using their lateral line, as a result, they're a lot pickier about the bait. Where these ambush bass, I just don't find that they're that picky. You can catch them on a jig pretty much all the time. So I try not to overthink it too much with these fish, the ones we're fishing for right now, but those pelagic fish are definitely pickier. Now we're dragging through these brush piles, not getting any bites. This is typical. I know that you guys are probably like, why isn't he catching a fish? And this is just how fishing goes, guys. You don't just pull up on the lake you haven't been to in a bit and just start catching them in the first 10 minutes. This is not how it goes. You gotta look around, feel around, figure out what these fish are doing, get a feel for the lake for the day. I don't just come out here and just start catching them immediately all the time. And I try to say, like, in general, when I'm on a lake, if I can start getting my first couple fish in the boat in the first 2 hours, I'm having a great day. It takes me a lot of times, again, 2-ish hours to really get stuff dialed in most of the time, because you have to figure out the depth they're in, what type of mode of fish you want to actually target, the bait selection, the speed of your retrieve. There's all these little factors that make a big difference, and you can't just say, okay, I'm going to roll out here and just always start catching them. It becomes a lot easier when you have the forward-facing sonar, but even the guys who have forward-facing, the top pros and stuff, they still need practice time to find these fish. It's not like most of these guys are going out here without any practice or any information and just pulling up and just catching fish right away. It takes time, and that's why I do these longer uncut videos. One, just to kind of talk to you guys through this process, but also just show you that it's not like that easy. I'm also here in the middle of the day. It's not like I'm here in the morning when the fish are super aggressive. I mean, it's just kind of, I can get out when I can get out, and if the fish are biting, they're gonna bite, but if not, I mean, they're not. So you can't get too bothered by it. And, oh, there's one. Oh gosh, dang it. Okay, that was a brush pile I marked with a fish in it, and he freaking smacked it. I don't know how he didn't get it. Dang it. Okay, well, that is a really good sign. So literally the one brush pile I marked with fish, which is brush pile 233. I didn't mark a fish in 234 or 242. The one brush pile marked with a fish in it, I got a bite. Now it didn't didn't catch it, but that's a really good sign, very good sign. That means I should be able to just go around and mark brush with fish and be in business. We're gonna drag on this pile for a minute more, make a couple more casts, maybe throw a couple different baits just because we just got bit. In that pile right now. That's a really good sign though. Don't know why he didn't get it. He just must have been a little guy. Oh my goodness. I'm watching them chase over here in a brush pile, over the top of another brush pile I know about. What in the world? They're literally chasing on this pile. Right on the surface. Why are they doing that? Okay, well, we know they're in these piles. They may be shallower than I'm thinking though. Let me make one more cast here with this crankbait through this pile, and then we're gonna roll over and fish this, look at this other pile, because literally I just watched like a big group of shad kick up. And so we've established that we can determine that there are fish in these piles by graphing them, which we knew we could do anyways. But anyways, we know that these fish are setting up in piles. Just got bit off this, didn't catch one. That's not a problem in any way. I just, we just need to figure out the right depth for these piles and the right presentation, but did not hit the pile on that cast. Let's keep them honest on this one really quick, and then we're gonna go roll and graph those piles over there, because literally just saw some fish bust there. Okay. Ooh. There he is. Nice. On the crankbait. Pile we just graphed, freaking choked it. There we go. That's old school bass fishing for you right there, guys. Absolutely choking it. Ooh, fish is bleeding. Give me a second, guys. Oh, there we go. Beautiful fish right there, guys. I'm gonna get him back in. I just nicked him a tiny bit, but not a big deal. Solid 2 1/4 pounder. Got that fish on the Strike King 5XD. Something tapped at the cast before that. Ooh, got some water on the camera. Let me get that for you guys. There we go. Awesome. Okay, let's get back there and make another cast. They're in these piles. That's what I'm freaking talking about, guys. Okay, so 40 minutes since we started talking and doing all this. Got our first bite. You might think that that is a long time. It's not a long time. That is very quick, actually. But you saw the whole process of how we found this pile. And again, had to kind of dial it in a little bit. Oh, here's another one. Oh, dang it. He just came off, popped off. Dang it. He freaking choked it. I thought he choked it. He hit that thing hard. Maybe they really want a crankbait today. Interesting. They didn't bite the jig, but they bit the crankbait. That thing choked the crankbait too, so makes me think we can run more of these piles and get them on the crankbait. That was not a fish, that was just me hitting the pile. Got bugs all over my screen up here. I got my forward facing covered up completely, and again, you don't need forward facing to catch these fish, guys. As long as you understand how to use that side scan, down scan, you just locate them and catch them. Not that big of a deal. And that's the nice thing about, again, these ambush fish are a lot easier to target without forward facing, because you can use traditional sonar and just line up on waypoints and catch them. The challenge comes in with those pelagic fish, those chasing fish. So I'm gonna hit this brush pile a couple more times with this crankbait. Then I wanna graph where those bait fish were coming up a second ago. And then we marked another brush pile back here that we said had fish in it, I remember, and I didn't stop and cast on it. So we at least know we have one more brush pile for sure that has fish, and hopefully we can catch them out of that deal. And if we can, that would be great. And then I do want to show you this other style of fishing too, this pelagic style, but this is, I mean, fishing 101 right here in the fall. Crankbait in brush piles, freaking sweet. Okay, let's go graph this up real quick. I want to graph these other piles. Okay, there we go. So let's get back on it over here. The brush pile we just caught the fish out of here was in 10 foot of water, but there were bait kicking on the brush pile was up here in like 5 foot, really shallow. I don't even know if I have a bait that I can throw in that tied on. I'll have to figure that out, but we'll worry about that later. Look at this. There's so much shad in this pile right here. There's shad all over this stuff. Maybe that's why the crankbait worked better, because they were actively ambushing the shad as I was working through there. These brush piles right here I have marked. These are really old markings. These are the ones you can see on the screen. This is where those bait fish were kicking. I don't want to get too close to them. I'm gonna try to stay within like 50 feet and try to side scan them and see if we can see fish around them. If we can, oh yeah, you can see a few right there. There's bait pushed up there too. There's definitely a couple of fish up there. Look at that bait up there. Ooh, okay. I'll switch the sides, can't show you guys. Okay, so these are these fish, again, setting up in an ambush mode. They're around these brush piles, and you can see the bait balls right here. I mean, they're shad all up here. I'm gonna make sure I have this marked, because that right there is actually a fish. You can see a fish right there in that pile. I like that. I'm just gonna mark that with a fish icon. And I also see another wad of bait right here. I'm just gonna mark that wad of bait so I can fire on that. And that should be good. Let's get back out of here. Okay. Man, there's all kinds of stuff going on around here, but I really like that. I want to get up and throw on this quick because they were literally busting here a second ago. So let's spin back the boat, get back lined up on our waypoint deal. You can see we have multiple brush piles. I need to figure out a bait to throw though, because I can't throw that 6X or that 5XD through there. Okay, let's see if this works here. I got an Alabama rig. It's rigged up to be weedless. I don't know if these swim baits are, these might be too big, but I mean, they say a crankbait, this should be fine. Got that brush pile right in front of me here. Got a little bit close on this, so I was messing around with the camera, but let's fire that A-rig out there, see if we can hit that against some of these piles, see if one reacts. I love throwing an A-rig in the fall, especially when I'm not using forward facing. I used to feel like I was like kind of cheating when I threw an A-rig in the in the past, but now with forward facing, I don't feel as bad throwing the A-rig. So I'll throw it now just because it's, I guess it feels less bad. I don't throw the A-rig and the forward facing together. That I still can't do. It feels just, I know how powerful the A-rig is, especially on those pelagic fish. It's a great tool on the pelagic fish. I just can't bring myself to use it in combination because it feels like it's too powerful. It's too good. Maybe you guys are like, man, you should definitely be throwing it if it's too good. Maybe I should be, but I like to kind of just stick with my own personal way of fishing and what I like to do. So I only throw the A-rig now without forward facing, but see if this will even work. If not, I'll toss a jig up there too, I guess. I don't really have a lot of good options because it's so shallow up there. I don't think I've hit that pile once though. Maybe I need to let that bait sink for a second more. I also haven't got up to the piles I marked fish on, so we're still working our way up. Kind of straight ahead of us actually, more off to the side. Let's get this bait out there, turn the boat a little bit. Yeah, I'm casting. Those other ones were a little bit deeper in, but these are more straight ahead. Get myself lined up properly. And this A-rig, I'm not doing anything fancy with it. I'm honestly just trying to see if I can hit these piles. They're really shallow, so I'm surprised I'm not hitting them, just randomly casting out here. But for some reason, I'm not hitting them. Sometimes just fan casting this A-rig though can get you bit, but again, the baits might be too big, or I'm not really sure. It looked like pretty small bait fish in those piles, but again, they ate that bigger crankbait. Oh, one just thumped it. Okay, it's not the problem then. Right on that waypoint. That's wild, guys. I mean, right when I marked those waypoints, right on them. This might just not be the bait. Let me make one more cast. I got hammered that cast. We're gonna throw that crankbait down there and just risk it. It's kind of more out in that direction, isn't it? Lining up on these waypoints can be, especially if you don't have a heading sensor, can be kind of disorienting. So definitely make sure you invest in a heading sensor on your front unit if you are going to throw at waypoints on your front graph. It's not that expensive to get a heading sensor, and it always keeps track of where the nose of your boat is pointed and will make it a lot easier to hit offshore objects and brush and all kinds of stuff like that. Okay, I just hit that brush pile right through it. Right there too, okay. Well, I worked through that brush pile, that cast, and nothing. One more cast, and then I might pick up that crankbait. I normally throw like a Strike King Series 6 when I want to work these really shallow brush piles. It actually works pretty well. The Series 5XD actually comes through them decent too, so I'm not super worried about it, but I just don't want to dig so deep into the pile, and I like working stuff kind of higher up in the water column with these sunny days, so that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm not actually worried so much about, again, like it's overpowering the depth. It's just, I'm just gonna reel a little bit slower so it doesn't go as deep. Slower you wind a crankbait, the shallower it dives. So I'm just gonna wind it a little bit shallower, maybe work it a little bit like a jerk bait, potentially. Just pull that thing through there and get hung up. Classic. Okay, that's not what we wanted to do. Give me a second. Oh, there it is. Came out. Okay, nothing there. What about this other pile? Let me throw a jig in this really quick, just to make sure. Flip a jig there, and then that brush pile we marked with the fish. That's where we actually saw the fish, so that is the one we really care about. The one we think we're actually gonna get bit out of. Getting kind of close to this pile. This is just how it goes, guys. You make a lot of casts. You kind of just experiment around. We also know that that fish was, these brush piles are shallower, and the first brush pile I got bit out of was in 10 foot. So these brush piles might just be a little bit too shallow. There may just be random, you know, bait that's chasing on these flats. There may not be fish up here. The one we marked that's near the end of this, it looks like it might be slightly deeper. We marked the shad, but we didn't mark fish necessarily. So it may be one of those things where we need to just, again, focus on those brush piles that we actually mark fish in. So casting right now on that pile we saw the fish on, so maybe this one will be the magic pile. We'll see. And if not, we're gonna go hit, we got one more brush pile to go hit anyways that we marked earlier. We'll go check that one out. And then we're gonna maybe mix it up. But if I was gonna continue to fish today, guys, without forward facing, I would just continue to do this all day. I would mark more brush piles, continue to find the brush that has bait and fish around it on side scan, and just roll. And do this all day. Just catching that one fish lets me know that that is a pattern that will work all day long, especially in these conditions. So it's not necessarily that it was like a one fish fluky thing. When you catch fish doing something like this, you're gonna get more bites. It's just finding more and more of those brush piles, and it would be a very repetitive process if I just kept doing this in the video. So I'm gonna switch it up a little bit, but anyways, we'll go fish a couple more. But this brush pile right here we're in feels kind of mucky. I don't know how to explain it, but it doesn't feel very very fresh. Feels like there's a bunch of slime on it with this jig, but who knows? We'll see. I'm gonna bring my jig up and see how it looks. Does it look mucky? Yeah. I'll try cranking it, I guess. Probably gonna come back with a bunch of slime. Slimy brush piles. Sometimes those slimy brush piles will have fish around them, but it's just, I never really get bit out of them, even though they may I might see fish around them. I never really get bit out of the slimy brush piles. Don't know why some brush piles get slimy and others don't, to be honest, but okay. Throw that crankbait down there, 2 more casts. Oh my goodness. He just knocked a foot of slack in my line. How did he not eat that? What in the world? He knocked the fire out of that crankbait. Oh my goodness. Literally, that fish just knocked a foot of slack in my line. My line went completely slack. That does not happen when you hit a brush pile. Oh, there he is. There he is. Okay, they want the crankbait. They want the crankbaits where I mark them on the pile. I mean, I mark this spot with a fish icon, pull up, throw a crankbait, and catch him. I mean, there we go, guys. So I'm freaking talking about. Strike King 5XD in the top of the mouth. Good fish. Completes the pattern. Shows that we can catch him without forward-facing sonar. Solid 2.5 pounder right there. Back down there. I'm gonna make another cast because literally the cast before that I got hammered too. That was sick. I love catching them cranking, guys. And cranking in the fall is so fun. No forward facing sonar. No nothing, just waypoints and good times with you guys. That's awesome. So these are these ambush fish, guys. This is how you do it. It's the full process. Don't know how else to explain it other than what I just showed you. This is the way to do it. And it's interesting because, oh, hung up. Dang it. It's interesting because they wouldn't eat the jig on that pile. They will eat the crankbait. Go, got it off. Oh, what in the world? Just smacked it again. They will eat the crankbait though. They will not eat the jig. And one of the two is gonna work. One of the two. Crankbait or a jig. Pick your poison. There's one. One of the two is gonna work. Oh, what is that? Oh, it's grass. I thought that was a fish. Even I do that too, guys. Don't feel bad if you do that, or you think you have a fish. It's just a little wad of grass. It's weird, I'm getting multiple bites out of these brush piles, and I'm only getting one fish to actually eat. That is pretty normal though, I guess I will say. When I'm using forward facing, I noticed that I catch like one fish on a jerkbait or oh, this is like a brand new brush pile. It's leaves. The other one I think the first one I caught had that green stuff too. I think these are brand new piles. That's maybe why these fish are in them. And they look good on the graph. These are fresh piles. Someone's been doing their homework out here. More grass, dang. Okay. Anyways, that was that. Let me make one more cast. I'm not even gonna go fish that other pile. I know I can go catch another fish out of that pile. That's okay. I wanna show you these pelagic fish and see if we can figure those out just for fun for the second half of this video. We may not find anything though. We may just say, hey, go throw a crankbait in brush piles without forward facing. But I do wanna show you that style too and kind of give you an idea of what to look for in case you do want to do that. Because fish aren't always gonna be setting up like I'm showing right now, where you can catch them on a crankbait or a jig as well as you would like. I would say they're always going to be doing this on your lake somewhere, but maybe you don't have that many brush piles in your lake, or maybe you only find like 2 good brush piles. And then after that, if you only graph up like 2 piles, that means you're not really gonna have a lot of opportunities to do what I'm showing you here. So let's go try to figure something else out and try to find those pelagic fish, but those ambush fish, they work pretty well. Okay, so now that we figured out those ambush fish, let's try to find some pelagic fish. Whenever I'm doing that, I always start by graphing with my traditional side scan, down scan, and 2D sonar. The reason I do this is because if you try to find these fish with forward-facing sonar, it takes like twice as long. I've actually experimented and tried it. What happens is that you have to move the beam of that trolling motor around so much, with the trolling motor I mean, that it's really difficult to move forward and cover water while also beaming around. Now with side scan, down scan, you can actually see both sides of the boat and drive in a straight line, and we may have actually just found some fish as I'm in mid-explanation. Never mind, we did not find any fish. I thought we did, but basically you can drive in a straight line and you can get your down scan, side scan, 2D sonar view all at once, and I can see fish that might be schooled up on side scan 100 feet right and left of the boat, and I can see what's right underneath the boat at all times. And that's super, super convenient when graphing for these pelagic fish. And because I can graph it 3.5 to 4 miles an hour, I can also cover a lot more water. I can cover twice as much water on my graph as I can with a forward facing. Now, some anglers will find that it's easier to identify fish on forward facing. So if that's the case, you can just get out here and randomly scope around. I don't know, I don't really like doing that. It just feels like a waste of time to me, and I would prefer to do it like this. So we are seeing a few wads of bait fish, and kind of a couple key points to look for when you're looking for pelagic fish. One, you want to find a good concentration of bait fish, and then 2, you want to find a wad of bass like we just saw pop up on the screen. Look at that, that is the perfect example. Thank you, fish. So here's your bait. That's your bait fish right there. And then we actually have a school of fish over here. You can actually see the dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those little black kernels. Those are bass. And then we have shad over here, which is what those fish are chasing. And then we have these, which are bass. Those are bass right there. You can see that they're stacked on this side scan, no more than horizontally. I guess technically you have to think about it like this is the bottom of the lake and this is the transducer of the boat. So they're stacked no more than 3 dots right to left, and they're spread more across the screen or across the bottom than they are tall. So those are 100% bass right there. And I also like the fact that they are right on this channel. So we have a really nice creek channel here, which I really, really like. And this creek channel is going to funnel those bait fish and get those fish just set up there. We can also see when we pull up our downscan view, just roll back, we can actually see these fish. They're not very easy to see on that downscan. Those are those fish right there. They're very hard to see because they're probably not very big fish. I don't think that these fish are going to be like the ones we just graphed up, at least. They're not going to be like 5-pounders. They're going to be like pound-and-a-half fish. But that's not that big of a deal. What I am excited about is the fact that we found a zone that potentially has some fish in it. So what I want to do now is, before I drop the trolling motor, if I was fishing with some of my buddies like Jimmy, he would already have the trolling motor in the water and he'd be firing at those. But I like to kind of establish a zone that these fish might be in so that I know which direction to go. I know those fish are in that little zone right there, but I don't know if I need to be going kind of left of those waypoints, right of those waypoints, maybe more towards the bank. Maybe there's a certain band that more fish are in than others. So I like to kind of graph around just for like an extra 5 minutes. Not anything crazy, just to establish a working area. One thing that a lot of anglers talk about when they're graphing out here and trying to find these pelagic fish is trying to find a football size area, football field size area, 100-yard stretch that has a lot of fish present and a good amount of bait fish. If you can find a zone that's 100 yards long that has a lot of fish, it means you're gonna be casting at fish regularly, fairly consistently. Here's another little wad of fish on bait. You can see them right here, not big ones, but there's a ball of bait on our 2D sonar right here, and then right there is actual fish. So we're gonna mark this with another group of fish. We have more pelagic fish here. Again, pelagic fish are fish that are related specifically to the bait that they're feeding on. They move because of the bait. They're not related to like a brush pile like what we graphed earlier. This means it's going to be really hard to target these fish without forward-facing sonar. If you want to go target these fish, the only way you really can do it effectively is if you're in an area where there's so many fish all around, like schooling and busting, hundreds of fish in the area, that they're actually busting on the surface, or they're like just hundreds of them swimming around under the surface. Then that way, you know, in those situations you can actually catch them without forward facing. But in the situation we're in right now, you can see these groups of fish are pretty spread out. They're not stacked up in like one specific spot. There's another wad actually. They're actually setting up right on that channel, kind of close to where we found them earlier. There's another couple wads of them. There's a wad right there. There's another couple right there. And they're out here by this channel. A little bit deeper too, that's interesting. There's more of them right here. There's definitely much fish out here. So we have that marked. I want to head this way just a little bit more just to see if we can find, are there more fish on this side too? Because that'll give us a really good working zone. And we can determine where we need to start, where we need to stop. I'm gonna see if I can see any more fish on the side scan or on the down scan. It doesn't look like there's as much activity over here. Doesn't look like there's as many fish, but I'm not gonna rule it out quite yet. It seemed like they really like being right where that little sharp channel was. So that is kind of the zone. And so if we could establish like a zone over here, we have these waypoints. If we move this over, we have these waypoints here, and then we have this waypoint 248. And so we have a nice like football field size zone right in here that we can narrow down and fish. So I really like that. I'm gonna stop yapping and graphing, and we're gonna start fishing with the forward facing. So let me actually get that turned on. I don't even have it turned on. You can see no source. Give me a second to get that turned on. Okay, so let's try to catch some of these fish. I got my waypoints pulled up here and got the forward facing sonar active target 2 on. What I'm looking for in particular are the same basically groups of fish that I was seeing on side scan, down scan, but on the active target. So there's a couple of fish actually right in front of the boat. They don't look very big, but I want to find wads of like 6 to 8 bass that are grouped up together rather than trying to cast a bunch of individual bass. So I'm hoping, these look really small, so I'm hoping that we can find some of those. The ones I just threw at were not bass, I don't think. They didn't react at all to my bait. They look tiny, but we're gonna basically go through the entire zone where we dropped our waypoints and scan back and forth now that we have a general zone established, and find ideally wolf packs like we talked about around these bait balls. So we have a bait ball on the screen now at 70 feet. There's one fish around it, but it's not actually feeding on the bait itself. We would like to see fish that are actually actively feeding on bait in the best circumstances. There's some big dots down there. I don't know what those are. I don't think those are bass though. They're just kind of hanging out randomly. We do have a few fish that popped up on the screen at about 90 feet. Not sure if those are bass yet or not. It's going to be pretty obvious when we see the bass because they're going to be grouped up in these big wads, kind of like we saw on the side scan, down scan. And the best guys at this don't cast until they're like 100% sure they're looking at bass on the screen. And I am not one of the best in the world at doing this. So I might be making a few extra casts, but you can see how high that bait fish are there. And as I kind of mentioned earlier in the video, a lot of these pelagic fish on these sunny days will push higher up into the water column to chase the bait fish. So if you do see a bait ball that's hanging really high like that, I do like to throw at those at times. But most of the time, if you're going to catch a fish out here doing this, you're going to find these bait balls are going to be higher up, and the fish that you can catch are also sitting higher up chasing them. So we don't see anything crazy at the moment, but there weren't that many groups that we were seeing on side scan, down scan. So it may take us a second to relocate these fish. We also have the wind blowing, which can push this bait and push these fish around minute by minute, hour by hour. So it's not as easy as it looks because you see all these dots. You see I'm not casting at any of these dots. There's a million dots. There's big balls of bait fish, everything like that. But like right now I'm not seeing any bass in the actual bait itself. It's just bait. So 60 feet, big bait ball, no fish around the bait. Not the best sign. We're going to keep scanning this area, hoping we run into a little wad of them. But as things stand at the moment, not seeing much. I don't see really that many groups, and I might have just, seen a couple down there that looked okay, but they weren't actually what I'm looking for, and so we may have to kind of expand our search area a little bit. But because the bait fish are constantly moving and shifting, even with the slight wind picking up, it could have pushed these fish 20, 30, 40 yards away from where I made those initial waypoints. So we're gonna look around, see if we can find them. To be honest, guys, I like doing what we did at the beginning of the video a lot more. With the brush piles and the old school waypoints and stuff is a lot more fun, but this is what a lot of the best anglers in the world are doing right now to catch their fish. And oh, there they are right there. You see those bait fish 70 feet out, and there's shad, there's bass underneath those shad right there, right in our strike zone, right where we wanted to be. And you can see those fish are in that bait. Let's see if we can actually catch one. They did not react to my bait at all. There's another couple right here. You gonna bite my bait? No? Okay. You can see those fish are on that shad though. They're kind of in and around that bait ball. You can actually see them like up in the bait, 50 feet. They're inside the bait ball right now. I can't see my bait super well, so I'm hoping that even though I can't see it, they can see it. I'm hoping it's there. There it is. Oh, come on. My bait popped out at 40 feet and they did not want it. When those fish are actively feeding on that bait, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to get them to bite. There's only 2 fish in that pile, or in that wad of bait, so it's not like they're all over the place in there. Maybe there's too many bait fish, not enough bass. Oh, there's more bass coming. Oh, look at those bass at 70, 80 feet. Those are good ones. They're swimming right towards that. Let's see if I can get a cast on those. Come on. We're all around them right here. Come on. Eat my deal. Oh, I missed the cast a little bit. You can see those fish right there. Those are the ones we're looking for. There's more around here too. There's that bait ball. There's fish in that bait ball. There's random brush out here too. I don't know what these fish are doing. They're just kind of randomly swimming around. Another bait wad. I mean, we're in and around some good stuff. It's just, oh, there, those fish are chasing the bait. Those are the, look at that, look at that. Oh my gosh, get down in there. How can you not get bit right there? Eat my bait, come on. Oh, come on. Oh! This is not as easy as it looks because they're not eating it. Come on. Come on. They're literally right on the surface, but they won't touch my bait. They're all around. Look at that. We're actually back over closer to where we marked those things earlier in the day. We marked some fish randomly on the bottom and stuff. We're actually right over by those waypoints. So what we marked earlier in this video is actually panning out to have some fish around it. It's just I can't get them to bite this, and I need to figure out the bait. That's the thing. Figuring out the bait is the most important thing with these fish. Is it's just a lot of times they want a very specific bait size or color or something very specific. They're all in these bait balls. I'll switch to something else. I got a little prototype rig on here, a little core tackle prototype. Throw this. If I can get my rod untangled. We're in them right now, guys. It's just, there's a lot of shad in the area. That's the problem. When there gets to be this much shad, it can be hard to differentiate. So I got a bait that has a little bit of a blade on it, and I'm hoping that that will actually work out a little bit better, get these fish to actually commit. Look at all these freaking fish chasing around. Need to find a wad of them that are up and wanting to eat. My bait, at least. They're eating. They're choking on stuff. I need them to eat my bait, not everyone else. Oh, come on. Nope. Ooh, look at them. They're going crazy on those shad. They're in those shad right now, just gorging themselves. Look at those dots in that bait ball. That's wild. It's cool to see that. I don't know how to get them to bite, but it's kind of cool to see. But as you can see, these fish are so keyed in on the shad that you have to figure out the bait. Honestly, I am not the best at like fine-tuning my bait because I always just throw a jig and a crankbait like I showed in the beginning of the video. So I'm not like used to having to dial in my baits as much as guys do with these fish, where you're really trying to match the hatch exactly and trying to figure out the right retrieve and all this stuff to get these fish to bite, because they're just gorging on this shad out here all over the place. It's just figuring out, do they want to, I just trucked right through those fish. Are you kidding me? We need to find bigger groups of them, because that's the thing, is I'm throwing in a lot of these wads where there's like 2 or 3 fish in the wad chasing on the shad. Maybe I need to find a wad of fish that has like, or a wad of bait that has like 20 fish around it. Maybe I'm just casting at schools that are too small. There's not enough competition. There's too much bait to too few fish. That might be my issue at the moment. So let's kind of scope around just for a second and see if there's any bigger wads of them. We haven't really seen one yet, but there's got to be one around, like a group of like 10 or 15 fish that stack together, rather than just these like isolated 1s and 2s on the bait. I would normally throw a bigger bait when you have those 1s and 2s. Oh, there we go. Those guys are right on the surface. Look at them, there they are. Come on. My bait gonna get down to them? Oh, come on. They're swimming so fast. Those are 100% bass. They're swimming faster than I can get down to them. Now they've come to the boat. They're right underneath the boat now. Dang it. That was a wad. That was one you could probably catch. Where'd they go? They're underneath the boat right now. Not good. Okay, well that was at least a wad. That's kind of what we're looking for. We're right kind of back towards where we marked that one of our first waypoints. So that was a school of like 7 or 8 of them. I just missed the cast on them, which is typical for my experience fishing this way. But you just gotta be patient. It's kind of like waiting for schooling fish. You just kind of gotta be patient and just wait until you get your opportunity. Don't cast a bunch of random stuff. And once you get the opportunity of seeing a group of 4 to 10 bass, you gotta make your cast count. But this feels harder than the brush pile deal to me at times, even though it seems like it's easy. Like when you find a group or an area where they're just wadded up like crazy, it does feel easy. It feels really simple. It looks simple on TV or like in other YouTube videos, but a lot of time is spent doing this, where basically guys are hunting that little deal and then they just show you the one moment where it like is going down and it's like, oh man, this looks so easy. And I mean, it's not hard per se, but it's also not, I wouldn't consider this easy. I would consider this kind of a pain in the butt at times, actually. Kind of scoping around and looking for these fish. But I kind of like that zone where we're out of it. It's interesting because we did establish a zone where these fish are in, because we're getting out of the zone where we marked. Oh, there's some fish. What are y'all doing down there? Did I make a cast? Come on. Is that the cast? Come on. You actually going to be bass and you're going to eat? That's the question. Are you bass and you're going to eat? I don't think these are bass. No, there's a little. They're too little. Those are crappie, probably. Dang it. I thought I had something there, but those are definitely crappie. My active target is set pretty hot, so the small dots you see on the screen are going to be pretty small fish. The bigger blobs are going to be your bigger bass or bass, but like a lot of these random blobs are not even bass. A lot of these random blobs are just like carp and junk. There's a lot of junk, trash fish. I say junk, but like trash fish in this lake. A lot of trash fish in this lake. So there are other lakes where like 90%, oh, there's one, he's on it, come on. Eat it, fish, there's a bass on it right now, 20 feet. You're not gonna eat it? Okay. Random bass out here, I guess there are a couple of random ones. He didn't want to eat it though. He's still out there. He's chilling. Doesn't seem very big, that's the problem. Okay, let's keep rolling. I don't know if they like this bait either. I don't know which bait to throw. That's the problem. Don't know which bait to throw. I'm gonna cut this off. Actually, I had a bait I was catching them on the other day out here. I'm gonna try that instead. It's another prototype, but they were eating it at least. I caught like 2 on it, so let's see if that will work. I'm gonna get another one out of here real quick. My super secret core tackle box over here, guys, with all of my core tackle prototypes. Sneaky stuff. Get this deal rigged up. This was working. You guys are probably looking at my screen and there's like 3-pounders like everywhere. As soon as I stop getting on the trolling motor, they're probably all crushing over there, but that's okay. We're gonna get this swim bait on and try to catch one. This is the only bait I could get him to bite the other day. These fish get so picky, guys, on this deal. And it's funny because like we've been fishing now for a long time and not catching any. And before we graphed for quite a long time to find those brush pile fish. And but when we found them, we caught them right away. So that's kind of a typical scenario too. One thing with these fish is you spend a lot more time on the trolling motor for these pelagic fish, chasing them around, and your opportunities are there, but it's not like non-stop. And that's one thing, again, misconceptions about this deal is that you catch fish red hot. And even the best anglers in the world, I ran the stats the other day on the Major League Fishing Tour. Ooh, 1 second before I do those, like freaking good ones. Those are bass, those are freaking good ones. I ran the stats for the Major League Fishing Tour, and like the best guys catch 20 to 25 fish a day, like in the top 3 guys. If you're fishing the top like half of the field, you're usually catching like 10-ish fish a day. 10 to 12 fish a day. And this is guys who are fishing for 7.5 hours after 3 days of practice on the Major League Fishing Tour. So it's not like guys are absolutely just smashing them non-stop, catching fish every cast. It's like they might have a window where these fish just turn on and you catch like 15 fish in, 10 minutes or 20 minutes at times when you like are really on it. But most of the time it's just one fish here, one fish there. You get a couple opportunities every, hour or so. And after that, you just kind of hope that you run into enough fish to catch a dozen a day, even at the top level of the sport with practice and everything. So hopefully that encourages you a little bit or makes you less discouraged if you get out here and you're not getting bit. That's one of the other reasons I like doing these videos. Obviously I'm showing myself not catching fish, and some guys are gonna be like, why aren't you catching them every cast? What is this? But like, we've caught 2 fish in this video, no practice, just showing up. And if I'm out here for 7.5 hours, if I caught 10 more fish, I would have an extremely good day by the standards of like pro fishing. I'd be in the top half of the field of a professional level tournament any day of the week with 10 fish, 12 fish the size I caught today, in pretty much any lake across the country, which I think would shock a lot of people just based on the numbers. And this is off of Major League Fishing with every fish counts and they're catching as many as they can. First day of the tournament when they're not holding back, like all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to get too discouraged when you're out here. This is pretty typical, but okay, so we got this new bait rigged up. Let's see if they like this any better. And one thing I will call out, guys, is that a lot of times anglers overestimate the number of fish that pro anglers catch in a given fishing day. I ran the numbers for Major League Fishing for all the tournaments in 2023 or 2024 this year, and the number of fish that were caught. And basically, on average, the top anglers that were fishing in the top 5 caught an average of like 19 fish a day. And then the bottom 10 anglers caught like 3 fish a day. So this is after practicing for 2.5, 3 days straight. Some guys pre-practice or have years of experience on these lakes, and they're still struggling to catch 5 fish in a given fishing day. So don't feel discouraged if you get out here like I'm doing right now. I mean, I haven't caught a fish yet out here, and I'm chasing all these fish around and trying to make it work. A lot of times you catch these fish in flurries. You might find that these fish get really active and aggressive for a 30-minute to an hour window, and you catch 5 or 6. And the rest of the time, it's a lot of doing this, kind of waiting for them to bite or just kind of scoping around, doing this. It's not fast and furious all the time. And if you caught like 12 scoreable fish in a Major League Fishing event, every single tournament across the board, every time of the year, you're going to be like middle of the pack every single tournament, catching 10 to 12 fish. So, I mean, I haven't caught 10 to 12 fish today, but I feel like I could be catching more if I went and stuck with that crankbait pattern. And I still think there's a feeding window these fish might start feeding in if I fished out here for 7-8 hours straight on even these fish out here. So it's not something to be discouraged about if you go 20, 30, 40 minutes without a bite doing this, because a lot of times it just matters about getting in the right little pocket, the right little zone that has fish in it that are aggressive and feeding. And other times it's just literally a timing thing. These fish just bite. Sometimes it's working through all these different baits to figure out which baits are the best. I'm trying to figure that out right now because I am not doing a very good job of that. Let's see if, oh my gosh, I'm right in the middle of all these. Like, there's fish in that bait right there at 70, 50 feet. They're in the middle of that bait ball right there, and they are just, I drop my bait right on them, and they don't care. So that is crazy to me how that works. How you can be right in the middle of them. They're right there underneath that bait ball, 40 feet. Right in the dead middle of them. And I know there's so much bait there though, that's why they're struggling to probably even see my bait. Let's see, that's a good cast, come on. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. Oh, get it, get it. There's like 5 of them on it. Get it, get it, get it. Come on. Come on. Oh, they're actually hitting it now. They're not eating it. Come on. You kidding me? They're all over it. Finally got a group to actually try to mess with my bait, and they didn't eat it. And that's how that goes. Great. And that's where the frustration of fishing with forward-facing sonar comes in, because you're like, how did those fish not eat that? And I'm like, come on, that was perfect. It was right around them. Oh, there's one. Come on, fish, eat it, eat it, eat it. He's all over it. Oh, you kidding me? He didn't eat that either. Now I'm dropping it down to these. Oh, they're not there. Okay, that fish didn't want that. He didn't care at all for that. Let me try a different bait, I guess. It's not the bait for him today, even though it was working last week. Try this. We're around some fish, for sure. It's just a matter of will they eat my stuff. It's wild. Oh, more fish over here. Pushing that bait 50 feet away from the boat. Oh man, they're all underneath it. Look at those fish. Come on. Come on. Oh, he's on. Oh, get it. There we go. Finally got one. Oh, they're small. That's why it took me so long to get one of these fish to bite. Finally ate it. My goodness. Had to work a bait quick. Nice little fish. This is something I've been doing a lot recently, guys, is working a bait super fast. This is the Hog Farmer Stroll Shad. It's a new bait, and I'm pairing it with a 2/0 1/4 ounce core tackle tush hook. So I throw that like Hog Farmer Spunk Shad on the 4/0 3/8 ounce tush a lot, but I've been throwing that smaller Stroll Shad, which actually fits really well with that tush, and I work it really fast and pop my rod, and I've been able to get some fish to bite that. The faster I work it, the more they'll commit to it, and finally figured I'd retrieve on this deal after freaking 40 minutes of messing around, or 30 minutes of messing around. So got a retrieve. We're in the same zone. It's not like we've moved. I mean, I'm literally right next to one of the waypoints we marked. So we're around fish, and so now maybe we're gonna get into them a little bit more, but we actually got that fish to bite, which is awesome. They're just little. That's probably part of the reason too why they're not really munching my stuff, is I'm throwing bigger baits. We also got some of this wind kicking up though. Maybe that's helping from a condition standpoint. I'm hoping that's the case. There's some more right here. Come on. Nope, didn't want that. Oop, there's some down there. I think these fish that are higher up though are going to be easier to get to bite from what it seems like, rather than these fish that are deeper down in the bottom there. There's fish down there, but I think the ones that are higher up are the ones that are catchable. Chasing up on the surface, I just need to get around the right little deal of them. So exactly what we talked about though, the bait fish, when they're pelagic, they're going to rise up, and those fish are going to be higher up as well. So it's exactly what we were talking about earlier. It's just a matter of finding them. I don't like doing all this chasing around for a 14-incher or 12-incher though. That's not very fun. I would rather be doing this for like 4 and 5 pounders. It would make this worth it, to be honest. But for a lot of guys, they're winning tournaments and doing this because they find those zones and they get a lot of time on the water, and they find a group or an area like we're in, and there's, you know, those fish I catch there, maybe there's groups of 3 and 4 pounders rather than groups of 14 inchers like I'm finding today. So this is not necessarily a great example of how productive this pattern can be, because literally this is how every tournament's getting won right now. But this is what the guys are doing from a strategy standpoint. They're just around more fish and bigger fish. That's all it is. I'm just not around a ton of fish or big fish. There's more shad almost than bass, and I probably could graph around and find another area that has more, but I don't really want to do that, to be honest, right now. I'm just gonna see if we can pick off one or two more in this general zone. But probably the right call, if you're especially around a bigger lake, is you can see there's fish doing this pattern, so you would want to find a section of the lake where they're doing exactly what they're doing here, but there's more groups of big ones. Well, there's more groups, period, and there's bigger fish in the groups rather than just little 14 inchers, because this is definitely not worth the amount of time I'm spending on this. If I was gonna make this happen today or fish today, I would definitely be starting with pattern number 1, that ambush pattern. But as I mentioned at the top of the video, there's going to be fish doing this chasing and there's going to be fish doing the ambush, and usually one is going to be better than the other, especially if you're in like a tournament. Usually right now the pelagic chasing fish are going to be better if you can find the right wolf packs of like 3 to 4 pounders, just because these fish get less pressured and they can be kind of easy to catch at certain times of the day. A lot of times that happens more early in the morning or later in the afternoon, like we're here now. They'll start to kind of get more aggressive. Midday, it's not as good. But if you don't have forward-facing sonar, you can always go with the ambush method, lining up on the waypoints, graphing with side imaging, all that stuff like we did at the beginning. And that is my preferred way to fish. But I like to show off a little bit of everything to you guys, just so we have a mix of content here to show you, because I know there's guys who are interested in both. I know there's some guys who are very not interested in this, but I do know there are guys who are interested in it. And I've had some really good days doing this, guys. Like, I've had days where I've caught 25 to 30 pounds doing this on certain lakes. It's just, right now, this specific lake, this specific day is not happening. But that's just fishing too. Ooh, I like that right there. What are those? Are those can't be bass. I don't know what those are. And I screwed up the cast. Nice. I don't know what those are. They're like giant things floating. If those can't be bass, those have to be something random. Some random species. I don't know what they are. Like carp or something. They're not swimming very fast. That just lets me, that's kind of a trigger to make me think they're not bass. They're also kind of like blobby. But I could be wrong. Maybe I throw on this and I catch a 4-pounder. Who knows? Oh, ooh, 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 ooh. Eat it. Oh, okay. Maybe it was a bass. I don't know. He's on it. Get it. Oh, come on. What are they doing down there? It looks like they're almost like on a tree or something. Let me see if I can crank that. I'm freaking going to a crankbait again. This is how you know what I like to do. I'm out here trying to throw a minnow around and I end up picking up a crankbait. But there's some good ones on that tree right there. It's definitely a tree. There's definitely good ones on it. I don't know if I can get them to eat this crankbait, but if I can, oh, come on. Come get it. Come on. Oh, there can't be bass. Why'd he follow the minnow then? They just got scared away from my crankbait. Those cannot be, those are not what I'm looking for. Anyways, I thought maybe I could make that happen with a crankbait. And now that I have the crankbait in my hand, I just want to throw a crankbait. Let's go through this little deal. There's a little rocky spot we marked over here. I'll see if I can just crank this really quick, just for fun, and see if we can catch one. Well, my camera cut off there at some point, so we're just gonna cut to the end here, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this longer form Fish the Moment video where we talked about the ambush bass versus the pelagic bass. I was able to catch some really good quality fish on that Strike King 5XD with traditional offshore methods, no forward-facing sonar, and actually struggled with forward-facing sonar. As a little twist, you would think that, you know, with forward-facing you catch way more fish, but it's not always the case, to be honest. And I was catching I caught the one fish I caught him on again on that hog farmer stroll shad with that 2/0 1/4 ounce tush from Core Tackle, just a little loop knot. This has been a little bait I've been catching quite a few fish on recently. I found that they eat it pretty well, even sometimes better than the Demiki. And so I've been experimenting with that and a few other rigs just to kind of do something different than the standard Demiki rig on these kind of pelagic fish. So I don't know, it's kind of an interesting deal. It's hard to always make that decision of whether you want to fish for the ambush fish or for those roaming fish, especially if you have forward-facing sonar on the boat. My instinct is to always go more towards the ambush fish because I feel like they're more consistent. But if you think about how tournaments are being won right now, if you are a tournament angler, the pelagic fish I showed you, even though I didn't catch a bunch or big ones today, are what the majority of tournaments are being won on. So definitely try both strategies out if you have access to forward-facing. If not, focus on those ambush fish. They're going to be a lot more consistent, a lot easier to find and catch, and obviously you can still catch them really well with just standard offshore fishing methods even in 2024. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a comment down below. Also like the video. We'll see you all next one.